The lights of the city glittered like 1,000 unshed tears, distant and cold. From his glass-walled office at the top of the Corvin Enterprises building, Nick Corvin stared at the skyline, a whiskey glass balanced between his fingers. The amber liquid caught the light, but there was no warmth in its glow. The world thought he had it all, billions in assets, a real estate empire that stretched across continents, and a name synonymous with power. Yet the emptiness he felt gnawed at him, a hollow echo inside his chest. The fortune he had amassed, the power he commanded, meant nothing if there was no one to inherit it, no heir to carry forward his legacy. He set the glass down with a decisive clink and turned toward his desk. Legal contracts, acquisition reports, and sealed envelopes awaited his attention, but none of them filled the void in his life. He'd tried love once, years ago, but it was a messy, unpredictable thing, a liability he refused to entertain again. This wasn't about love or family. This was about legacy. He picked up the sleek black phone on his desk. His assistant, Evelyn, answered on the second ring. "Sir?" "Bring in the file on potential candidates," Nick said, his voice crisp and detached. "Yes, Mr. Corvin." Moments later, Evelyn entered the office, a thin folder clutched in her hand. Her eyes flicked toward him with something that almost looked like pity. She placed the file on his desk and hesitated. "Are you sure this is the right way to go, sir?" she asked softly. He met her gaze, his icy blue eyes unwavering. "This is a business decision, nothing more." She nodded and left the room. Nick opened the folder and scanned the list of names, women from exclusive backgrounds, each vetted for health, intelligence, and discretion. But each profile felt sterile. He was about to close the file when a different page caught his attention, an anomaly among the polished resumes and pristine photographs. Her name was Samantha Gray. The photo attached to her file was grainy, likely taken from a security camera. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes shadowed, her clothes worn and mismatched. The note at the bottom was blunt. Homeless. No known family, no assets, no liabilities. She was a blank slate, no entanglements, no risks. Something about her hollow eyes mirrored the emptiness he felt. A strange curiosity stirred within him. 2 days later, Nick's car rolled to a stop in front of a shelter on the east side of the city. The neighborhood was forgotten by time and ignored by wealth. A biting wind whipped through the streets, and people in threadbare coats huddled in doorways, seeking refuge from the cold. Nick stepped out, his presence as sharp and out of place as a diamond in a coal mine. His polished shoes crunched on the cracked pavement as he approached the shelter doors. He pushed them open, the scent of stale coffee and despair hitting him immediately. She was there. Samantha Gray sat on a plastic chair in the corner, her knees pulled up to her chest, her eyes staring at nothing. Her auburn hair fell in tangled waves around her face, and her cheeks were hollow, the lines of hunger etched on her skin. She looked up as he approached, her green eyes wary and sharp. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice low and rough. "No." He sat down across from her, his gaze steady. "I'm here to offer you an opportunity." Her lips twisted into a bitter smile. "I don't need charity. This isn't charity." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's a transaction." That caught her attention. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of transaction?" He took a deep breath, the words tasting like steel on his tongue. "I want you to have my child." Her breath hitched, disbelief flashing across her face before settling into guarded suspicion. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No." His tone was flat, unemotional. "In exchange, you'll receive financial security for life, a home, medical care, whatever you need." She laughed, a hollow sound that scraped the air. "You want to pay me to be a surrogate?" "Yes, but you will carry the child to term and then walk away. No strings, no involvement." Samantha's eyes searched his face, looking for cracks, for signs of cruelty or mockery. She found none. His face was a mask of control, his jaw clenched, his eyes unreadable. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You have no attachments, no past. You're a clean slate." Her fingers curled around the frayed edge of her jacket. She'd spent years surviving on scraps, on the indifference of strangers, on hope that dwindled like a dying flame. And here was a man offering her a future, in exchange for 9 months of her life. It felt like selling a part of her soul. But wasn't her soul already broken? "What's the catch?" she whispered. "No catch." He hesitated, just for a moment. "You walk away with your life changed. I get what I need. She looked away, her eyes glistening. Her mind raced with the possibilities: warmth, safety, food, a chance to stop running, to stop being invisible. And yet, something deep inside her protested. The idea of bringing a life into the world only to give it away felt like a wound waiting to happen. But survival had its costs. This was just another price to pay. Her eyes met his. I'll do it. For the first time in years, Nick felt the faintest hint of relief. He extended a contract toward her, the weight of legality and finality bound in leather. She took it with trembling fingers, scanning the cold, impersonal words that would change both their lives. The weeks that followed blurred into a strange, surreal routine. Samantha moved into a high-rise apartment, its luxury suffocating in its emptiness. Doctor's appointments, blood tests, scans, all scheduled with precision. Nick visited only to ensure everything was progressing as planned. He kept their conversations brief, his demeanor cold. The contract was clear. This was a transaction, not a relationship. Yet something in Samantha's eyes haunted him. She was a contradiction, fragile yet unbreakable, lost yet resilient. Her quiet strength gnawed at his carefully constructed walls. 3 months in, during an ultrasound appointment, the technician paused, frowning at the screen. "What is it?" Nick's voice was sharp, his body tensed. The technician smiled slowly. "Congratulations. You're having twins." The room spun. Samantha's hand flew to her stomach, her eyes wide with shock. Nick's heart pounded, a rush of unexpected emotion flooding his veins. Twins. This wasn't part of the plan. 2 lives instead of 1. 2 hearts beating inside her. He glanced at Samantha. For the first time, fear and wonder mingled in her gaze. In that moment, the transaction fractured. The walls he'd built began to crumble. The drive back to Samantha's apartment was steeped in silence. The city's glow streaked through the windows, illuminating the edges of Nick's clenched jaw and Samantha's trembling hands. The technician's words echoed in both their minds. Twins. 2 lives. Twice the complication. Twice the weight of what they had agreed to. Nick's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his mind a maze of calculations. He had meticulously planned every detail of this arrangement. A single child, an heir, a manageable, contained scenario. But now the plan had spiraled into uncertainty, and uncertainty was a language he didn't speak. Beside him, Samantha stared out the window, her eyes glazed over. She pressed her hand against her stomach, as though trying to feel the truth of what was growing inside her. 2 hearts beating beneath her ribs, 2 fragile lives tethered to a cold contract. She finally broke the silence. "Are you going to change your mind?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Nick's voice was low, controlled. "No." Samantha turned to him, searching his face for cracks in the veneer. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, expression blank. But his fingers, wrapped tightly around the wheel, betrayed his tension. 2 children weren't part of the plan," she said softly. "Plans can be adjusted." There was an edge to his tone, a defensive wall built brick by brick. Samantha recognized it, the same wall she had built around herself during years of living on the street. They were 2 people who had mastered the art of survival through distance and detachment. Yet now, that carefully cultivated armor was beginning to fracture. Back in the sterile luxury of the apartment, Samantha drifted to the window, staring down at the glittering city below. Her breath fogged the glass. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life was a glass bubble, beautiful, fragile, and on the verge of shattering. Nick lingered by the door, his presence a storm cloud in the pristine space. "You'll have everything you need," he said, the words hollow. "The contract covers it." Samantha's fingers curled against the cold glass. "Contracts don't cover feelings." His jaw tightened. "This isn't about feelings." She spun around, eyes blazing. "Maybe not for you, but I'm the one carrying them. The ones who weren't supposed to exist." His gaze flickered, just for a second. "You knew what you agreed to." "I agreed to have a child," she said, her voice shaking. "Not to, and certainly not to feel like this." He stepped forward, the air between them thickening. "What do you feel, Samantha?" Her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Like I'm already losing them." The silence that followed was suffocating. Nick's shoulders slumped slightly, a hint of weariness cracking through his polished exterior. "I didn't ask for this either," he said, his voice low. "But we can't go back." For the first time, the certainty in his voice faltered. He turned and left, the door closing with a quiet finality. Samantha pressed her forehead against the glass. The city stretched below, indifferent to the war waging inside her. In the weeks that followed, they drifted in and out of each other's lives like ghosts tethered by obligation. Nick continued to attend the appointments, but his presence was cold, clinical. He spoke to doctors, signed paperwork, and made decisions with mechanical efficiency. But he rarely spoke to her. Every morning, Samantha woke up feeling the weight of the contract wrapped around her heart. The apartment felt more like a gilded cage, each luxury a reminder of the price she was paying. She filled the days with idle tasks, reading, walking through the empty rooms, staring at the skyline. Yet nothing could quiet the storm of doubt inside her. One afternoon she sat in the nursery, her hand resting on the curve of her belly. The room was painted in soft, neutral colors, elegant, impersonal. Two identical cribs sat side by side, waiting for lives that would soon enter the world. She closed her eyes and whispered to the unborn twins, "I wish I could promise you more." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't hear the door open behind her. "You could." Nick's voice was soft, hesitant. She turned to find him standing there, his eyes shadowed with something unfamiliar, vulnerability. "What do you mean?" she asked. He stepped into the room, his gaze drifting to the cribs. "I've been thinking about the contract." Her heart thudded painfully. "Are you changing the terms?" He hesitated. "No, but maybe we've been wrong about the terms all along." Her brow furrowed. "I don't understand." He took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to unravel the tightly wound control he'd held for so long. "This arrangement, it was supposed to be clean, simple. But nothing about this has been simple." She looked away. "You're the one who wanted it that way." "I know." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Because simple meant safe. I thought I could buy an heir and keep my life untouched. But these past months, I can't pretend I don't feel something." Her eyes met his, wide and wary. "What are you saying?" He took another step closer. "I'm saying that maybe this doesn't have to be just a contract. Maybe it can be more." Her breath caught. Hope flared, sharp and painful. "You mean a family?" The word hung between them, fragile and terrifying. "I don't know if I'm capable of that," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I want to try." Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, but the scars of her past screamed caution. "You can't just decide to feel something, Nick." "I know." His gaze was intense, unwavering. "But I can decide to stop running from it." Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to reach for him, to let the walls crumble, but fear held her back. "And what if you change your mind?" "I won't." His voice was steady, his eyes shining with a sincerity she had never seen before. "This isn't just about an heir anymore. It's about you and them." He looked at her belly, where the two lives they had created continued to grow, oblivious to the chaos of the world they would soon enter. Samantha's walls cracked just a little. Her voice trembled. "I don't know if I can trust this." "I'm not asking you to trust me yet," he said softly. "I'm asking you to let me try to earn it." A single tear slipped down her cheek. For the first time in months, a sliver of warmth, of possibility, crept into the cold space around her heart. She nodded just once. "Okay." It wasn't a promise, it wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. Nick reached out and gently touched her hand. The warmth of his fingers grounded her, tethered her to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this story could have a different ending. Cliffhanger ending for Block 2. As they stood together, the walls between them beginning to dissolve, a sharp pain shot through Samantha's abdomen. She gasped, doubling over. Nick's eyes widened in alarm. "Samantha!" She clutched his hand, panic in her eyes. Something's wrong. And just like that, the fragile hope they had built trembled on the brink of collapse. Samantha's gasp sliced through the air, sharp and sudden. Her fingers clutched Nick's hand as pain shot through her abdomen again, deeper this time, like a fist squeezing from the inside. The nursery, with its soft colors and gentle light, blurred at the edges of her vision. "Samantha!" Nick's voice cracked, raw with panic. He dropped to his knees beside her, his arm steadying her trembling body. "Talk to me. What's happening?" Her breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. "Something's wrong. It hurts." Nick didn't hesitate. He slipped an arm beneath her knees and lifted her effortlessly, his jaw tight with fear. "We're going to the hospital." She didn't resist. Her eyes squeezed shut, sweat beading on her forehead, as another wave of pain hit. The world outside the nursery faded, replaced by the searing sensation consuming her body. Nick carried her through the apartment, his mind a whirl of chaos. This wasn't supposed to happen. Everything had been planned, controlled, but life, these fragile, growing lives, refused to fit neatly into contracts and agreements. The hospital lights were cold and unforgiving. Samantha lay on the examination table, her knuckles white as she gripped the edges. Machines beeped steadily around her, a cruel reminder of how thin the line was between safety and disaster. Dr. Reynolds, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, studied the monitors. Her fingers moved over Samantha's abdomen with practiced precision. "Deep breaths, Miss Gray," she murmured. Samantha obeyed, but the fear in her eyes was undeniable. She searched for Nick, who stood just beyond the sterile curtain, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked out of place in this world of vulnerability and pain, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the fragility of the moment. Dr. Reynolds straightened and turned to face them both. "There's good news and bad news," she said, her voice even. "The good news is that the twins are stable for now, but you're showing early signs of preterm labor." Samantha's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to take precautions to keep them in the womb as long as possible, Dr. Reynolds explained. "You'll need to stay on strict bed rest. No stress, no strain. You need to be monitored closely." Samantha's heart sank. "For how long?" "For the rest of the pregnancy," the doctor replied. "If we're lucky, that could be another 10 weeks. Her mind reeled. 10 weeks confined to a bed, 10 weeks of waiting, wondering if every moment might be the one where everything unraveled. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay." Dr. Reynolds turned to Nick. "She'll need full-time care. Emotional support is crucial." Nick's face was unreadable, his eyes locked on Samantha. "She'll have everything she needs." But Samantha heard the doubt in his voice, a hesitation that sliced through the fragile hope they had started to build. The days blurred into a monotonous rhythm of stillness and silence. Samantha lay in the bed Nick had set up in the sunlit corner of the apartment, her body a prison, her mind a battlefield. She counted the hours by the movement of shadows on the wall, each one a reminder of how precarious life was. Nick visited daily, bringing her meals, checking the monitors, fulfilling every requirement of the contract. But the connection they had begun to forge in the nursery seemed to shrink, wither under the weight of fear and uncertainty. She watched him move around the apartment, his posture rigid, his words clipped. He was trying, she knew that. But the cold distance was returning, like a wall sliding back into place. One evening, as the sunset bled gold across the city, Samantha finally spoke. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. Nick paused by the window, his back to her. "What?" She swallowed, the words thick in her throat. "I know this isn't what you wanted. You don't have to pretend." He turned, his eyes shadowed. "I'm not pretending. Aren't you?" Her voice wavered. "You've done everything the contract says, but you're not really here, not with me." He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "I'm doing what I can." "Are you?" A tear slipped down her cheek. "Or are you just waiting for this to be over?" His silence answered for him. She turned her face away, her chest aching with more than just the weight of her body. "Go, Nick. If this is just another transaction to you, then leave." The words hung between them, sharp and final. He hesitated, his eyes conflicted. Then, without a word, he grabbed his coat and left. The door clicked shut, and the emptiness swallowed her whole. The night was endless. Samantha lay awake, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. The city lights outside seemed distant, cold stars in an indifferent sky. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the faint fluttering movements beneath her skin. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know if I can give you the life you deserve." A sharp kick pressed against her palm, as though the twins were answering her, refusing to give up. She closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her, but sleep refused to come. Her mind spiraled into memories of streets, shelters, survival. She had clawed her way through so much darkness. She thought this deal had been her way out, a cold, calculated escape from a life of struggle. But now, it felt like another cage. Hours later, the sound of the door opening startled her awake. She blinked into the darkness, her heart pounding. Footsteps echoed in the silence. "Nick?" Her voice was hesitant, brittle. He stepped into the soft pool of moonlight, his face drawn, eyes hollow. He looked like he'd been fighting a war inside himself. "I couldn't leave," he said, his voice rough. I thought I could, but I couldn't. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Why? He took a shaky breath. Because this isn't just a transaction anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. Her heart twisted painfully. Then why did you walk away? Because I'm scared, Samantha, he admitted, his voice breaking. I'm scared of wanting this. Of wanting you. The confession cracked something inside her. She reached out a trembling hand and he took it, his fingers warm and solid around hers. You don't have to be scared, she whispered. We can figure this out, together. He knelt beside the bed, his forehead resting against their joined hands. I want to try. I want to be here for you, and for them. Tears filled her eyes, hope threading its way back into her heart. Then stay. He looked up, his eyes glistening. I'm not going anywhere. In the quiet darkness, they clung to each other. Two broken souls daring to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could heal. The hospital hallway stretched before them, cold and sterile. Nick's shoes pounded against the floor, each step a drumbeat of fear. Samantha's hand gripped his tightly, her face pale, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. Pain rippled through her body, and a strangled gasp escaped her lips. Hold on, Samantha, Nick urged, his voice tight with panic. We're almost there. But inside, a storm raged. He had fought to control every detail of his life, every outcome planned and calculated. Yet here they were, standing on the precipice of something he couldn't control. The idea of losing Samantha and the twins was a weight so crushing he couldn't breathe. A nurse rushed forward with a wheelchair. We'll take her from here. Nick hesitated for only a second before releasing her hand. Samantha's eyes flickered with fear, but she gave him a weak nod. I'll be right behind you, he promised, his voice trembling. She squeezed his hand briefly, before the nurse whisked her away through the swinging doors. As they disappeared, Nick felt a hollow ache open up inside him. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. Helplessness was a foreign and unbearable feeling. He sank onto a plastic chair in the waiting room, his elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the antiseptic scent clawing at his lungs. Time twisted into a meaningless blur. The doors swung open, and Dr. Reynolds approached, her expression carefully composed. Nick's heart pounded wildly. Mr. Corvin, she said, her voice steady. We've stabilized her for now, but the labor is progressing faster than we'd like. The twins need to be delivered immediately. Nick's chest constricted. Will they be okay? Her eyes softened slightly. They're early, but with the right care they have a good chance. We're doing everything we can. And Samantha. His voice cracked. She's strong, but this will take a toll on her body. She needs you to be strong for her now. The words pierced his heart. He nodded, pushing himself to his feet. Can I see her? Dr. Reynolds nodded. Briefly. The delivery room was a flurry of controlled chaos. Nurses moved quickly, machines beeped, and the air was thick with tension. Samantha lay on the bed, her face contorted with pain, her hair damp and tangled. Her eyes fluttered open when she felt his presence beside her. Nick, she whispered, her voice weak. I'm here, he said, gripping her hand, his own trembling. I'm right here. Her fingers curled around his, fragile yet fierce. I'm scared. He swallowed hard, the weight of those words sinking deep into his bones. Me too. But we're going to get through this. All of us. A tear slipped down her cheek. Promise me you'll be there for them, no matter what happens. His throat tightened. Don't say it like that. You're going to be there too. She gave him a small, exhausted smile. Just promise me. I promise, he choked out, pressing her hand to his lips. Dr. Reynolds's voice cut through the moment. We're ready. It's time. Nick's heart pounded as he stepped back, his eyes never leaving Samantha. She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and nodded. The world dissolved into motion, voices, and the sharp, sterile scent of fear. Minutes felt like hours. Nick stood just beyond the operating area, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of a counter. He forced himself to breathe, to stay present, even as dread threatened to consume him. Then a sound cut through the noise, a thin, wailing cry that pierced the air like a miracle. Nick's heart leapt into his throat. One baby out, a nurse called. A girl. Tears filled his eyes, blurring the world. But before he could react, another cry, just as small and fragile, joined the first. And here's the second, the nurse announced. Boy. A sob escaped Nick's lips, his chest heaving with a wave of emotion so intense it threatened to break him. He watched as the nurses moved quickly, wrapping the tiny infants in blankets, their cries filling the room with life and possibility. But his joy was short-lived. He glanced back at Samantha, her face pale and still, her body unmoving. "Samantha," he whispered, terror seizing him. Dr. Reynolds' voice was sharp and urgent. "She's losing too much blood. We need to stabilize her. Now." The world tilted on its axis. Nick's hands shook as the nurses wheeled the twins away, their tiny forms disappearing through the doors. He stumbled forward, desperate, his vision clouded with tears. "Samantha, please," he choked out. "Don't leave me." But she didn't respond. The hours crawled by, a relentless torment of waiting. Nick sat in the dim hospital room, the walls closing in on him. The silence was suffocating. He thought of all the moments he had wasted, all the walls he had built between them. He thought of how close he had come to losing everything before he had even allowed himself to truly have it. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. He looked up to see a nurse standing there, her face gentle. "You can see her now," she said softly. He rose on shaky legs, his heart hammering. The walk to her room felt like the longest journey of his life. When he stepped inside, his breath caught in his throat. Samantha lay in the bed, pale and fragile, but her eyes were open, and when she saw him, they filled with tears. "Nick," she whispered. Relief crashed over him like a wave. He crossed the room in 2 strides, falling to his knees beside her bed. He took her hand, pressing it to his lips, his tears hot and unchecked. "You came back," he choked out. She gave him a weak smile. "I never left." He let out a shaky breath. "I thought I lost you." Her fingers brushed his cheek. "You found me." They stayed like that for a long moment, the silence between them filled with everything they didn't have the words to say. Finally, she whispered, "Are they okay?" He nodded, his smile trembling. "They're perfect. A boy and a girl. They're waiting to meet their mom." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I want to see them." Nick nodded, his heart full. "I'll bring them to you." When the nurse placed the twins in her arms, Samantha's breath caught. They were so small, their tiny faces relaxed in sleep. The boy's hair was dark, like Nick's, the girl's a wisp of auburn. Nick sat beside her, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, his eyes glistening with emotion. "They're our miracle," she whispered. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You're my miracle." She leaned into him, her heart full. For the first time in her life, she felt safe, loved. And as she looked at the family they had created, she knew they had both been reborn through this journey. Nick's voice was a soft whisper. "Let's make this more than a contract. Let's make this a life." Her eyes met his, shining with love. "I'd like that." And in that moment, the walls between them crumbled for good. Their hearts, once guarded and broken, finally found their home in each other.